Perfect. Good afternoon, everyone. Glad you all could join us. Definitely excited to be here with you all presenting virtually. And we all hope you get a lot out of this presentation. Fun fact, at least I think it's fun, is that all four of the gentlemen that are presenting on here, we've all actually worked together during the 2018-2019 academic year at the University of South Florida. So just one thing that we also just wanted to mention first before we kind of dive into the presentation is just more so when it comes to questions. If you all have any questions as we're presenting throughout, please feel free to drop them in the chat. And if it's for the group, you can leave it as is, but if you have it directed towards someone, just put their name next to it so they can know to answer that question once the presentation is over. If there aren't any questions after the presentation is over or anything in the chat, what we'll do is just allow you to just use the raise your hand feature, and we can always go that way as well. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and share my screen to start the presentation. All right, so just to start off, like I said, this is the Day in the Life Athletic Advisor presentation. And so what I'll do, I kind of ran through just kind of some quick notes about us working together, but at least wanted you all to get familiar with everyone on this presentation. So I'll start it off and hand it over to JB.
Yeah, so my name is Jonathan Burgess. I am an academic coordinator at the University of Idaho. Started off in this field in 2017 down at South Florida, and then have been here at Idaho since 2019. Up here at Idaho, I work with a football program, as well as men and women's track, men and women's golf, men and women's tennis, and women's swimming and diving. In addition to my kind of normal sport responsibilities, I also am the point person in our department for eligibility certification. And I also have a lot of oversight over our tutoring program.
My name is Stephen Darville, Director of Football Academics here at the University of South Florida. I got my start back in the industry in 2010 at Georgia Southern University, where I was a tutorial coordinator. After a year there, I went up to the University of Maryland, where I was an academic advisor for football from 2011 to 2016. And then in 2016, I came down here to the University of South Florida as the Director of Football Academics. Here, I oversee all the academic support of our football program. I also oversee the academic coordinator for football and women's volleyball. I oversee our USF degree completion program. And then I also oversee all of our continuing eligibility certification process for the athletic side of the department.
I'm Michael Lozano. I'm a scholastic supervisor at Texas A&M University. I work with our football program, and I work with our upperclassmen on the offensive side of the ball. I entered into the field in the summer of 2017 as an intern at the University of South Florida. Spent 2 years there with these guys, and then moved to College Station in 2019. Worked as a learning specialist for 1 year, and then recently transitioned to my current role this past summer.
And I'm Keenan Maddox. I'm an assistant director here at Louisiana State University, LSU, and I work with the offense on the football team. We currently have 3 full-time staff members and 2 GAs a part of our team. And so I've actually been in this field almost 6 full years. Come June 1st, I started out at the University of Louisiana, Monroe, and was there for about 14 months before I made the move to Tampa, Florida, to work at the University of South Florida. So I started off as an academic coordinator, working with football with Stephen, and then also working with softball and sailing. And then a few years down the line at USF, I transitioned over to work with our men's and women's basketball programs. So here at LSU, I actually serve on the committee for the Student Support Summit. So I really do hope you all enjoy it. And then I also serve on our Name, Image, and Likeness Committee. And then I also deal with some certain things just more so involving and more so pertaining to football. And that's our daily operations in terms of our daily report that I facilitate and put together. And then also serving with our students with a game plan program. And then also an internal program committee that we have where I serve as a liaison for our football program. And so one thing I did want to point out about all 4 of us on this call who are presenting is that although we work with football currently as one of our main sports, we all have had a hand in an array of sports outside of just revenue generating sports, with working with Olympic sports as well. So we do hope you get a lot before that. So the next slide that we're going to jump into is going to talk about Power 5, Group of 5, and FCS. As you can see, we have 4 different institutions on this call. Some of us have worked at all 3 institutions. And so we just kind of wanted to give you all a brief overview of just kind of some differences and what it looks like working at one of those institutions. Starting with the Power 5 with Michael Lozano.
Yeah, so as I started my career in a Group of 5 University of South Florida, transitioning to a Power 5 school in the SEC, the biggest difference right off the top is the resources that we have available for our student athletes at Texas A&M, and in particular, the staff size. So at A&M, we have upwards of 25 full-time staff members in our academic support unit. That also includes 3 full-time staff members that work in our student athlete engagement. In addition to that, we have a director of learning services and 3 learning specialists that work with our student athletes in a very hands-on approach. We also have 1 math specialist, 2 reading specialists, over 100 content tutors, and upwards of 40 academic mentors that provide support for our student athletes. So this kind of shows you the size of our staff and all the moving parts that go into providing optimal academic support for our student athletes. And overall, this really heightens the expectations we have for ourselves and the standard that we set for our student athletes, making sure that communication is at an optimal level and that we are doing all we can to put our students in the best position to succeed. And that stands out to me in terms of just pure size at this level.
All right, next I'll take the Group of 5. Having worked at all 3 institutions when I was at Georgia Southern, we were FCS. University of Maryland is obviously Power 5, and then being here at the Group of 5. The first thing I'll say is that first point right there is the expectations really don't change. Our coaches, our administrators, our student athletes all have extremely high expectations. And so the expectations don't change, but what does drastically change is your resources and your staff size. As Michael just mentioned, they have over 25 staff members on their team. Here at the University of South Florida, we have 8 full-time. So they've almost tripled us within that, or they have tripled us within that. And so we have to learn how to do more with less. And so we have to be extremely strategic, making sure that we serve our student athlete population and making sure we serve our at-risk student athletes with a little less resources. Within that too, though, you will see kind of a spread of responsibilities. Whereas at a larger institution, you might be able to be a little more siloed in your responsibilities. At the Group of 5, you're going to see a little bit more spread, a little bit more on your plate. Probably not as much as JB is about to mention at the FCS group, but you do see a little more of that spread. But the thing, again, that I'll reiterate from the jump is the expectations don't change.
Yeah, and then just to follow on from that at the FCS level, again, the expectations don't change, but we're trying to do the same with even less resources again. So our staff size, we're working with 4 full-time staff and 1 grad assistant, which is actually a pretty reasonable size staff for an FCS school. And then our tutoring staff, we're looking at 10 to 15 tutors. So it's really kind of prioritizing that support, but still making sure that we are providing, high quality academic support services to our student athletes, and that those student athletes who really need that support are still getting access to it. To hit on the responsibility thing, I kind of listed out all the sports that I work with in my intro. So it's a lot of different hats that you're wearing, a lot of moving parts, and being at a smaller school, you do get to touch some more different areas of the academic support program. So, I've had a lot of input in our tutoring program, our certification side of things. So being at that smaller level, you do kind of get exposed to different areas within the department, which is kind of a great thing professional development wise, that you really get to experience some things pretty quickly. So that can definitely be one of the upsides to working at a smaller school.
Like I said, just wanted to give you all kind of just an overview. We know, kind of being in an industry, probably the time that you all have been here, you probably haven't been able to experience each of these 3 or maybe just one. So just wanted to give you all just kind of a general overview. So next we'll actually jump into our presentation, and we have 4 topics that we're going to cover that we think are very important. The first is going to be the duties that you'll have as an advisor. The second is going to be the communication piece that come with being an advisor. Third is going to be prioritizing your tasks and different things that come into play. And then lastly, we'll finish it up with just the relationship piece.
And then, yeah, so I'm going to jump in and kind of talk through duties. So these are things that will be pretty consistent across all levels in most academic coordinator, academic counselor positions. So academic support, eligibility, and advising, which I'm going to kind of talk about together, and then some additional duties that you're also likely to see. So academic support to start off with is really, I mean, it's the key piece of our job is providing those academic support services and making sure we're putting in our student athletes in a position where they're going to be successful. So for me, it always starts with creating a plan at the start of the semester, running down each roster, going through student athlete by student athlete, and deciding on what academic support they will need and be required to participate in. First step is deciding whose caseload they're going to be on. So here at Idaho, we have 1 learning specialist. So the first thing we do is really prioritize who needs to be on the learning specialist caseload, and who is going to be meeting with that person each week. So that's our first thing. And then from there, we're looking to split things up between a grad assistant, or it could be an intern, and my own caseload. So in terms of weekly meetings, I'm meeting with 50 to 60 student athletes each week. And then our grad assistant is taking on another 30 or so from there. So it's splitting things up, making sure that we're not overwhelming our grad assistant, particularly as she's starting off. So kind of gauging how much they can handle and really kind of splitting up the student athletes from there. When we're looking at this, we're looking at academic history, we're looking at the class status, different class schedules, GPAs, and all that kind of stuff that's going to come into our decision making here. Team history as well is a big one. So football academic support is going to be more structured and more intensive than maybe a women's tennis or women's golf. So it's kind of being aware of those things and making those decisions as we're creating that academic support plan. So weekly meetings, as I kind of touched on, is the first thing. How many times a week and who are they meeting with? Those are essential as those kind of touch points to get to kind of monitor that academic progress, work on that individual academic skill building, and also to really build those relationships with the student athletes. So those weekly meetings are the first things we're looking at. And then we kind of move on to tutoring. So again, looking at the history of how student athletes have done in certain classes, our knowledge as advisors on what classes are tough and what classes are more manageable, and deciding on tutoring from there. So here at Idaho with 10 to 15 tutors, really prioritizing who gets that one-on-one tutoring and who may be able to succeed in a group tutoring environment. So it's making those calls. And then looking at study hall to kind of round things off. So there's obviously different ways you can do study hall. You can have more of an objective-based study hall or more of a time-based study hall. The objective-based study hall obviously takes kind of some more resources. So it's, for us here at Idaho, it's almost a blend of the two. So it's doing that, and we're looking at a goal number of academic kind of support hours. So we may want 6 to 8 hours for a certain student athlete between those requirements, and that's what we're really looking at there with that academic support plan. Some keys to success with the academic support plan, structure and accountability are really important. And to get those, you got to set clear expectations. So for me, that starts beginning of semester team meetings. Those first weekly meetings with your student athletes, it's setting expectations and making sure everyone is on the same page and know what they need to do to meet their academic expectations. Again, working with less resources, making adjustments and kind of monitoring the progress is big. If we have someone who hits midterms and is struggling, where can we find that extra academic support? Maybe we have someone who is really doing well, and maybe we can kind of move some things around. So making those kinds of decisions is key to success. And then buy-in from coaching staff is huge. If the student athletes don't feel like their coach is on board, you're going to have a hard time having a successful academic support plan. So making sure everyone is on the same page, making sure the student athletes are kind of hearing it from all different sides, is really important, and making sure those communication lines between the academic staff and the coaching staff are open is huge. The next point I wanted to hit on was the eligibility and advising side of the job, which is another key part of it. For me, it all starts with the eligibility certification process. So depending on where you're at and depending on your position, you'll have varying levels of involvement in this, but having at least a working knowledge of it is really essential. So when that process is right and it looks good, you can then provide accurate eligibility outlooks and projections to coaching staff. And you can also use that within your advising, because you know what benchmarks need to be hit and how much kind of work needs to be done. So that's huge. And then as you're progressing through a semester, it works into the advising side of things. You know, if someone is struggling, do they have the flexibility to pick up a second 8-week course? Do they have the kind of elective space to do that? Are we already projecting in a session or summer classes that may be needed? So it's being aware of that, being aware of any GPA issues that may come up, whether you need to kind of strategically withdraw from something. Being aware of that is huge, and that all comes from kind of a good eligibility certification process and being able to do those projections. And then kind of moving more to the true advising side of the role, you want to have those conversations with the student athletes. You know, is this a schedule they can be successful in? And do they know what to expect from this major? You know, if they want to go into engineering, are they comfortable with science and math classes? So are they comfortable putting in the work to do well in that major? So having those conversations up front can be huge. And then, you know, knowing how many electives are available in a major, knowing what the prereqs and the tracks you may have to follow in that major look like is important, because then you can try and, you know, balance a schedule in or out of season, avoid practice conflicts, and that kind of stuff. So having that knowledge can really help you put the student athletes in good positions academically. And then the last point I have on there is just graduation plans. That's a great way to kind of map things out, and you can kind of look forward and see what each semester looks like. So graduation plans are important to really kind of make sure things are going the way they need to go. And then my final kind of slide, I just want to hit on some additional duties. So you're likely to see these in a lot of coordinator or counselor positions, but you won't necessarily see them in all of them. Supervisory duties. So I supervise a graduate assistant and supervise their professional development. So that's something you're likely to see. And then, you know, one thing that I kind of hit on already, but being at an FCS school and getting more responsibilities, I was our tutor coordinator for a year and have maintained some supervisory kind of duties over the tutoring program. So there's some good kind of experience you can gain there. Recruiting, pre-COVID times, you know, I feel like I was meeting with recruits almost every week. You're going to have those one-on-one recruiting kind of visits, group recruiting presentations. Biggest thing there is that you're knowledgeable on the university and the academic programs. You can, you know, speak intelligently about it, and that you can answer any questions that the student athletes or parents may have. So that's definitely a big part of the role that you're likely to see. And then building relationships outside of the athletic department is definitely something you'll see in a first full-time position. I know Keenan is going to hit on this a little bit in his kind of section, so I won't go too deep into it, but working with major and campus advisors, working with instructors, making sure they understand what we do as athletic academic support is essential. And then sitting on campus committees. So I sit on an academic support across campus committee, where we have different entities from all different sides of campus discussing best ways to support students. So being a part of that is huge. It stops the athletic department kind of operating in its own world and makes sure things are transparent and it kind of helps us do our job in the long run. So those are kind of the duties I wanted to hit on. Definitely likely to see those in a lot of coordinator and counselor positions. And that is all I have on duties.
Thanks, JB. I want to touch on the communication piece. It's super imperative in any field, but especially in this field, especially I can talk from a school like Texas A&M, where there's so many moving parts to make sure that communication is clear, it's concise, it's direct, whether it's via email, via text message, in person, whatever the case may be. And even more so in today's climate, right? As everything's transitioned to more virtual, whether it's class-based, whether it's academic support, tutoring, study hall, whatever the case may be, making sure that your communication is always at a high level, especially over communicating, right? Especially when you're tracking and monitoring academic progress, working with coaches, working with different stakeholders that are involved. That's kind of what I'm going to get really more into in this part of the presentation. But I also kind of want to just set a foundation as to that communication is more than just exchanging information, right? It leads to deepening connections and relationships with everyone involved, from your student athletes to parents to on campus, building that trust. And as JB alluded to, setting expectations and structure early on. So if you don't have that early on, you aren't communicating that early on, it's going to be really tough to build off of that moving forward and being able to have to adjust on the fly. And also it improves your teamwork and your problem solving, because as you know, this is a team-oriented field. So the first thing I want to talk about is kind of daily communication that my staff and myself go through at Texas A&M. And it's really important to note here, it's how to properly frame information, right? Talking about certain students' grades with different coaches, every situation, every student is different. So not one size fits all, right? So one of my responsibilities that I work with every day is overseeing our daily learning center reports. So our tutors and mentors from the previous day, I will compile all their reports along with any no-shows, and we'll send those out to our coaching staff. So it keeps them in the loop of what's going on, any trends that they need to know about. And most importantly, we're trying to avoid any surprises. And so we can catch on things early on and not wait till it's too late. Another thing we're super intentional about is group text messages. So we'll have group text chains with the student athlete, the respective supervisor, and the position coach. And this is really important because it's real-time communication. If a student's late to an appointment, instead of having to go through both different channels, it's all right there and readily available for all three parties. In addition, I'll talk about this a little bit more here shortly, but parent communication. Right? As long as we're adhering to FERPA guidelines, we have our students sign the Buckley Statement every semester. If allowed to do so, as a staff, we have a goal to meet with at least one parent bi-weekly, right? And this is just a great opportunity for us to keep the parents in the loop and they can understand our role and their student athletes' academics while being a student athlete. And I think it's super important just to have that transparency, communicate at a high level, and similar to with coaches and with our own staff, avoid any surprises too late. And I'll get in a little bit into different ways that we go about doing that, kind of bridging those relationships. And most importantly, in my opinion, especially in today's climate, is our interaction in our learning center, right? Seeing our student athletes on a daily basis. In addition, seeing our mentors, right? Having that FaceTime. Typically, in a normal world, we have all of our appointments are in-house. So we're able to have a list of appointments, know our students in what room at what time, and go check in. Make sure that mentors know that we have their support. They can ask us any questions, any issues going on, any concerns, any highlights, good things going on as well. So now that we've had to adjust and pivot, we hop onto Zoom calls and just make sure that FaceTime is there and that we are always available to answer any questions. And also it's just great to learn more about the student because we don't have that same connection that our mentor will have or our learning specialist will have, meeting with that student every single day on a weekly basis. So those are kind of the main points that I want to touch on as a daily communication goes and all the stakeholders that are at play. Next, from an internal communication standpoint. So here at A&M, our football academic staff is a 4-person team. And so we have weekly meetings. As you know, in this field is super fast paced. We're always moving around, having to adjust on the fly and problem solve. So this gives us a chance every week to sit down, collaborate, review that week before, and then also prepare for that following week and make sure we're always on the same page. We're sharing any conversations we may have had with on campus, with certain professors, with students, with coaches that can be applicable to our caseload, to our students. And it's really preparing any type of meetings we're going to have coming up with coaches, any type of events we're going to be holding. So it's a good chance for us to make sure we're all on the same page. And because at the end of the day, if I have offense, someone else has defense and freshmen, we still touch all those positions in some way, right? We're a 4-person team and we really pride ourselves on that. In addition, we meet with our learning center staff. As I talked about in the intro, we have a director of learning services who meets with students and 3 full-time learning specialists, in addition to assistant learning specialists as well, that all touch football in some way on a day-to-day basis. So we meet every Monday and we go through our caseloads one by one. And what's really important here is the sharing of information. And also, even though they're not talking about your specific student, that learning specialist could have received information from that student, from a professor that you may not know about, right? An extension on a paper coming up, class moving to Zoom, right? Different things like that to make sure we're all on the same page and we can make sure we're catching anything before it becomes a problem, missed assignments, attendance trends, big projects coming up. So it just gives us a chance again to communicate at a high level, all be on the same page. And we do this on Mondays to make sure that we're getting the week off on a strong start. And then again, in our facility, we're all working in person right now. So it's easy to have to, if we need to, stop by people's offices, but it gives us all a chance to be together and make sure that we are attacking this headstrong. Next, coaches, right? We have weekly coaches meetings with our head coach and position coaches. This also gives us a chance to share information about our student athletes, right? On there, we'll provide grade reports, no-show reports, any eligibility concerns, any announcements. As JB alluded to earlier, we're trying to eliminate any and all surprises. In addition to that, we also have one-on-one meetings, right? We select certain student athletes that may be of at risk due to a GPA issue, on academic probation, or maybe good, they're trying to graduate, right? What needs to be done this semester in order to graduate, right? So we want to make sure that we have those one-on-one meetings in those intimate settings with the respective position coaches in the beginning of the semester and also at the midterm point. And then lastly, our athletic training staff, so our liaison on athletic training meets with us during our Wednesday football academic staff appointments. Again, just a great way to communicate anything going on in terms of any injuries, treatment schedule changes, any medication updates, just to make sure that we're all focusing on our student athletes' overall wellness, and that's imperative. And we make sure that that line of communication is clear and understood on a weekly basis. Next, from an external standpoint, here, the foundation of this is just building relationships and bridging those gaps, right? And as I talked about earlier, parents. So there's 3 different ways that we go about doing this. So here at A&M during the fall in season, we have a game day family tailgate. And here we will meet with the parents, right? We will share grade reports and just have conversations with parents about their students' progress. Again, I think it's really important when we're communicating with coaches, parents, whoever's involved, is to make sure we're also highlighting positives, right? It's not always, well, X student did this, did that, right? We don't want a coach to see us coming down the hallway and be like, oh, here comes Lozano again with bad news, right? So I think it's super important to make sure we're highlighting positives, and parents enjoy that transparency, enjoy keeping them in the loop, and it works out really well for us. In addition, on the road, so we travel with our student athletes on road games. Again, before games, after games, a chance to have FaceTime with their parents is crucial. And then spring game, we have an event on the day of the spring game where we get to meet with parents, and just, again, I keep saying it and reiterating it, but building that relationship and making sure that they understand our role and that we are all on the same team to provide the best plan for their respective son in order to reach the goal of graduation and maximizing their time as a student athlete. The other 2 pieces that we have a role in as football supervisors is scouting and recruiting, right? So we'll meet with scouts, especially in the springtime. And this is really good opportunity to relay pertinent information outside of football, right? As you know, we have a lot of FaceTime with our student athletes, more than some of their position coaches do. We see them every day, and we also get to know them as people, as individuals. You know, are they punctual? Are they responsible? Behavior issues. And scouts really value that information. And I think that's a great opportunity for us to provide that information and that credibility for our student athletes if they have a chance to then go on and fulfill their dream of playing at the next level. And then recruiting. JB mentioned this as well. And I think what's really important here is setting expectations early about academics at Texas A&M, what we do, right? What our role is, and then highlight campus, right? Highlight different majors, different minor flexibility options, right? Highlight maybe our recent GPA from the previous semester. So making sure we're highlighting what we do really well and setting expectations to prospective student athletes and their parents. And then lastly, I want to touch on our on-campus, right? This is a big part of the machine, is working with on-campus advisors, professors, and institutions outside of Texas A&M, right? They play a big role in our students meeting that degree completion and staying in good academic standing, right? We, on a daily basis, not only a weekly basis, but on a daily, we're communicating with the advisors on campus. They're experts in their respective field, whether it's liberal arts, communication, engineering, right? And it's registration time. We're looking for a minor or major change, degree plans, students on academic probation, right? This is a great chance to make sure we're communicating our needs and our wants, but also having that two-way street. letting them know that we're appreciative of all they do for our student athletes, but also providing some context as to what we do from the athletic side of things. One unique thing we do at A&M is we have liaisons with respective colleges. So I work with our liberal arts, and we'll have monthly presentations during their respective staff meetings, again, just to communicate any highlights going on in athletics, new policies and procedures we may have, as well as just kind of laying a foundation about what we do. Professors, our director of football academics at Texas A&M, Dan Childs, does a phenomenal job of being that touch point with our professors due to his wealth of knowledge and experience at A&M, receiving attendance reports, progress reports, communicating medical excuses. It's very important to have that communication with professors to let them know our expectations for our student athletes, as well as kind of monitor and track how they're doing in that respective class. Institutions outside of A&M, right? We really rely on, in the summer times, in Maymesters, mini-mesters, relying on math and sciences and different classes for our students to take outside of A&M that works and that fits with their degree plan in pursuing their degree, right? And then lastly, we have a guest coaching program. And this is a phenomenal opportunity to bring all of those stakeholders I just talked about into our facility, give them a presentation on what we do. And then on game days, we show them around, give them tours of our facility, take them on the sideline during warm-ups. A great opportunity to bridge those relationships, continue to communicate and express how appreciative we are of all that they do for our student athletes, and the expectations they have for our student athletes as well in the classroom and on campus is imperative. So those are kind of the things we do on a daily basis, semester basis from a communication standpoint as a Scholastic supervisor.
All right, the next thing we want to touch on is prioritizing. Prioritization is going to be key for your success in whatever your first full-time role is. JB just got done rolling through all the different duties. Michael just talked about all the different communication, the avenues of communication, the internal, the external, all of these different types of things. And so obviously we always talk about our industry being high intensity and fast paced. And so one of the things that you to learn how to do very quickly is to prioritize. And that's going to be at the macro level and at the micro level. And really starting at the macro level is understanding the priorities of your calendar year. When are going to be those peak times? When are those really busy times that, you know what, you're not going to have time to get to that project that you have on the side, or you're not going to have time to get to that other thing that you want to do. You know, some of those times are advising, which then rolls into registration, certification after every single semester. Are you in season? Are you out of season? They both touched on recruiting and scouts. Those are times that I know there's times where I feel like I'm meeting with scouts 3 times a week. And so it's just those times that you've got to make sure that you understand what's coming down the pipe, what's coming up, that you have to make sure that you can allocate enough time for to make sure you get everything done that you have to get done. The next thing I want to touch on is the term managing up. The term managing up gets a really negative connotation a lot of times, but in the business world, it can be very, very vital for you to understand what it means to manage up and how that can help you be successful in your first full-time job. The first step of managing up is just establishing communication lines, understanding as Michael just went through, but you know, all of this deals within your supervisor, understanding the communication lines that they want. How do they want you to communicate? Is it, do they want verbal? Do they want written? Do they want text messages? These different types of things. You're not going to step in day one understanding and knowing all this, but one thing I want to make sure is that you're thinking of this in this time. The next part of that is learning to anticipate your supervisor needs. That kind of goes back to that macro level of the priorities, but understanding, you know, as you understand what's coming down the pipe, understanding what your supervisor is going to need, what type of information. And then the biggest part of that is learning to know how your supervisor wants information. It's been mentioned on here a couple of times, but the 4 of us were a team. We all work together within our football program. And so, you know, one of the things that all 3 of these guys did a phenomenal job of was learning how we ran football and understanding the processes of how we did it on a day-to-day basis and really a yearly basis too. And so all 3 of them are at different institutions and they all do things a little differently now. But when we're part of this team, they all did a great job of understanding what I needed, when I needed it, and how I needed it. And that made my job so much easier. And so if you're able to put your supervisor in that position, it's really going to go a long way for you. Now, I want to make sure I make it clear that it does not mean you can't bring new ideas to the table. We always want to bring new ideas to the table. However, understanding that is really going to help you progress and grow in your career. Biggest thing too is now getting a little more down to the micro level is have a game plan for the day. Don't ever start your day with just kind of saying, hey, I'm curious as what's going to happen today. For me personally, I have a digital to-do list that I map out on a weekly basis. Monday through Friday, I have tasks that I need to get done on each day. But just know that fires are going to pop up. Your coaches are going to need something. Your administrators are going to need something. Your student athletes are going to need something that you weren't anticipating. And so be ready for those fires to pop up. And know that some of the things on your list are going to get pushed down the list. They might get pushed to the next day or the day after that. But just understand that it's fluid and it's fast paced and high intensity. And so just make sure that you're ready to adjust on the fly. And then the last thing I'll say within the game plan for the day is know that you're not signing up for an 8 to 5 or a 9 to 5 job. Sometimes there's going to be those downtimes. It might look like that, but then sometimes you're going to have to put in a little extra time to get it done. And so just be ready for that as you step into this field a little bit deeper. And the last part really focuses on you and understanding that burnout in this field is very real. It can happen very quickly for you because we aren't an 8 to 5 or a 9 to 5 job. And so what are some of the things that prioritizing can help you not become burned out? The first thing is understanding the difference between a need and a want with your student athletes, especially when we're dealing with high-risk student athletes. The need is what we have to serve. A lot of times we might not be able to service all the wants of our student athletes, and that's okay. Understanding that and accepting that. However, we have to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our student athletes. As JB said, I think one of my favorite sayings in this is we're putting our student athletes in a position to be successful. I think I say that probably 15 times a day. That's the goal of what we do. And so understanding that we're meeting those needs, but sometimes there are some wants that you might not be able to meet. And then the last thing is sometimes some student athletes might be high maintenance, but they're not high needs. And that's across a multitude of sports. That's across a multitude of really high at risk to non at risk and kind of everybody in between. And so sometimes you're going to have unfortunately, might have some walk-ons that think they get everything that the most at risk student athlete gets. And that's not always the case. And so really kind of ties back into what JB talked about earlier and making sure that you have that academic support plan set up for your student athletes to understand who gets what. Because I'll tell you right now, if you try to service every single student athlete on your caseload across the board with every single want and meet the high maintenance wants of all of your student athletes, you're going to burn out really, really quickly in this industry. And so we want to make sure that, again, we're putting you in a position to be successful. So those are some of the things to keep in mind as you're prioritizing your year, your months, and your days.
All right, so here I am pulling up the leg for this presentation. And so the final topic that we're going to discuss is going to be about relationships and having those relationships within your university community and just within intercollegiate athletic academics. So the points that we'll talk about is just the importance of having relationships, building relationships with your student athletes, your coaches, campus constituents, and then also just making sure you have a strong relationship within your department and unit. So what is the importance of having strong relationships? The first point is that building strong relationships creates overall success. When you look at the scope of our job, although we do a lot and emphasis on a lot, many of those things we're unable to do without collaboration amongst other people, whether that's in our units or departments or across campus. For example, currently a lot of us are probably getting ready or in the registration period for this fall. And so with a lot of things, we're needing assistance probably from campus constituents with advisors, talking to them about holds, talking to them about prerequisites for courses, and even registration errors that'll come up as we're getting ready to register our student athletes. So having those relationships, you're able to reach out to advisors and touch base with them, and they'll get back to you pretty quickly, depending on that relationship. Relationships help your network. The way I view it is that sometimes it's not only what you know, and who you know, but also who knows you. And so that's something to always remember. this industry, as large as it is very small. So building those key relationships and personable relationships can take you a long way in the industry, especially when you're seeking a new job, or it's time for you to think that you've met all your goals at the current position and this new future job aligns with where you want to be. Being able to have someone who can speak on your behalf, speak to how you are, speak to who you are, your integrity, and different things of that nature is always helpful. And so also within that, having a mentor. I would recommend everyone seek a mentor if they can. And the reason I say that is because my mentor, or someone who's taught me a lot, is on this call with Stephen Darville. And so within that, I've learned a lot from him. I've been able to ask a lot of questions. He's, you know, he has a pretty good name in the industry, I would say, in terms of doing positive things. And so he can speak on my behalf because he knows my work ethic. So if you don't know anyone, I would actually tell you, you know, reach out to someone. See if you can set up a meeting with them to kind of pick their brain and then kind of let it grow from there if you don't have an organic relationship that you can build. How does it enhance these learning experiences? So overall, when you look at these strong relationships that you've built, people are more willing to open up and actually speak to you more. They're willing to give you maybe some insight on different processes and different things that you may not be aware of. And this on its own could be something that could help you not only navigate the industry, but then also navigate your institution. All right, so gaining the trust of student athletes, that is a big piece, of course, of what we do. And that is, and where it starts, is really you coming in and understanding who you are. You're now a full-time employee. So how do you kind of break this down of who you are as a professional and as an adult in this industry? When I came into the industry, similar to you all, I was 24 years old, I was full-time working. So that means that I had student athletes who were the same age as me, or maybe 1 or 2 years younger than me. And so being able to have conversations, it was tough at first trying to figure out how to make that relationship and draw that line, but it's something you have to do very quickly because at the end of the day, we need these jobs to pay our bills. And then so secondly, moving on to that is holding student athletes accountable. Once you build those relationships, holding student athletes accountable, I'm not gonna say it becomes easier, but that transition and being able to do that is something that you're able to actually work through, where it's not like pulling teeth. And so if you have the relationship of a student athlete, when it comes down to putting down the hammer and getting coaches involved, usually they understand that they put themselves in this position. They understand that you wouldn't just throw them under the bus over one small mistake. They know you've had multiple conversations with them on what to do and what not to do. Also, sometimes just giving them a heads up like, hey, I've let you slide 2 or 3 times so far. I can't do it anymore. So if it happens again, just know that I'm gonna have to report this and it's gonna move up. And what happens from there, that's on you. And so just being able to do that, and like I said, that comes with that relationship building. The last piece of gaining trust of student athletes is going to be, of course, you never want to lose a student athlete. And what I mean by that is you never want a student athlete to always ignore your calls, ignore your texts, never show up to your meetings, and different things like that that you may view as disrespectful. And so there's always a root to that. You can always go down to the root problem or where that may have stemmed from, but always take into consideration when you go to a new institution and you're meeting with new student athletes, be sure you give yourself some time and a grace period, in a sense, to try to learn and try to understand who your student athletes are. A lot of them, of course, they struggle in different areas, but just coming in and throwing down the hammer, you may lose a freshman and you may never get him back. And that could be 4 years of very rough relationship building. Developing a good rapport with coaches. So the way that I like to view it is that the first few months of working with a coach and his coaching staff is critical, or her coaching staff is critical, especially when it comes to the way that I view it is that it's actually, you're on an interview. And it's not a 1-day, 2-day interview. You're probably going to be interviewed for a first 2-3 months, sometimes a semester. And I can go back to a situation with Mr. Darville and I. We had a new coach come in. In our first meeting, it was rough to say the very least. And we walked out of that meeting in the 1st of January, not knowing and having any idea of what the rest of the semester was going to hold for us. But what I can say about that coach is that he understood what his student athletes needed, and he cared a lot. So that was his way of trying to see who we were and what we stood for in terms of working within this industry. So earning the trust of coaches, going in all that, we earned his trust. We earned his staff's trust. And so from there, you have to be able to work with those coaches and be able to communicate with them, similar to what has already been said. And so within those holding student athletes accountable, that's where this trust comes. So when you reach out to a position coach or the head coach or the academic liaison about some issues that you're having with a student, they don't sit there and question you or question whether you're giving them the correct information, or if you're just trying to get them in trouble, or if you have a grudge against them. They understand you're there for the right reasons to help this student athlete. They're struggling. They need someone to talk to them or something to come with some affirmative action behind it. Moving on to coaches talk. So understand that that relationship is very key with your coaches in terms of the head coach and the coaching staff and that support staff. Going back to a similar situation where I said, hey, you may have been at an institution for 2 or 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and you're ready for that next step that aligns with your goals. Don't be surprised if a coach picks up the phone at the institution that you've applied and calls your current coach that you may be providing information to. They talk. I've seen it happen quite a bit, whether that's head coaches or assistant coaches. So that's also a key reason why your relationship with coaches matters. And the last point on this is managing personalities between support staffs. So on top of your head coach, your position coaches or assistant coaches, you also have your support staff that comes into play, your strength and conditioning staff. You know, you may have a director of ops, you may have a player development, and you also may have an academic liaison. So understanding who those people are, understanding how they like to receive information and building those relationships just helps to alleviate a lot of different things off of you when it comes to certain fires that Stephen mentioned comes up. They know you're working on it, you've communicated it to them thoroughly, and that way you have those relationships as well. Campus, very big, very big. Why are campus relationships important? I know everyone has pretty much mentioned this, and I'm just going to talk a little bit more about it. But similar to what I alluded to earlier, and just in terms of the registration period, the advisors are professionals. They are professionals in their fields, and they know these majors in and out. Although we have a wealth of knowledge across a wealth of different majors, these advisors focus on that one major. They know what practicums these students need to be in. They know what internships, they know what courses look good and what grades look good for entry into maybe postdoctoral programs and different things of that nature. So it's always important that you have that relationship. The Office of Disability Services. This is one that can also kind of fly under the radar, but it's very important. Working in intercollegiate athletics and just working in education, you're going to deal with a lot of students who may not be college ready, who may be struggling, who may have learning deficiencies, learning disabilities. So being able to have that solid foundation where whether you're doing your psychoeducational evaluation through that office or in-house, and then also providing accommodations for your student athletes, being able to get those turned around quickly. You know, so a lot of these relationships, you can look at it as like, hey, if I don't know you, am I that willing to get back to you as quickly as I can? If I don't have that relationship and you're just asking me constantly for different things. So that's why it's key to build these relationships. Moving on to student advocacy. This is also a big one. When you think about this, you may have a freshman or even some upper class student athletes who may be on the verge of getting dismissed from your institution or who are on very thin ice. Sometimes they may be provided a student advocate on campus, which is someone who works in the college. So being able to have that relationship as well. So maybe when they get a referral or any new information on that student athlete, they also pass that along to you and keep you in the loop so that you keep everyone else abreast. Coaches, position coaches, if they need to let the parents know and different things like that. And then last but not least is faculty. Professors are huge. I know some of you, I would actually assume all of you have professors that do not input grades, whether that's Moodle, Blackboard, Canvas, or whatever grade hosting site you may have. So being able to have those relationships where you can reach out, 8 weeks into the semester and no grades have been posted, just to check with a professor on the progress of some of your student athletes. So that is also key because they sometimes can take a while to get back to you if they feel like you're just asking for them. And you never know how they may view you as well working in athletics. Last but not least, having a solid foundation. So this one is more so just talking about internally within your department and your unit. Understanding that everyone is on the same team. So understanding you're not in a butting head position or you're not looking to steal information or recreate the wheel and different things like that, but utilize these people. You're trying to win and bring along the same goals that the whole department and hopefully your whole unit is on board with you as well. So understand that it's okay to ask for help. Similar to what Stephen has said, we worked in a team of 4. So with those relationships, we know that we were all grinders. We know we were always on top of what we needed to do. But sometimes you just had too much come up in terms of fires or different tasks that now became priorities. And so being able to have that relationship and be able to lean on someone in your unit or someone on your team that you work with to ask for help is okay. And that comes with also having a relationship with them. And so lastly, with that relationship, being able to have that is important when it comes to having your own internal support system. We're all in the trenches together. We all know how rough some of these days can be and how great some of these days can be. And sometimes you're just in the middle ground, but understand that you have people you can bounce different things off of, ideas you can vent to, and just kind of get different perspectives. And so having those relationships within that is also a major, major thing. And so that honestly rounds it up for us in terms of our actual presentation. And so what we'll do is kind of open up for questions that you all may have. And like I said, if it's for the group, just let us know that, or if it's for anyone in particular between Jonathan, Stephen, and Michael and myself, then be sure that you can ask us directly. And while you ask those questions, if you have any, I'll also leave up our contact information just in case you may want to reach out to one of us or all of us for something. Like I said, we did talk about mentoring and different things and being new. If you want to just pick our brain, we just wanted to just let you know that we are open to that, and here are our contacts. So definitely feel free at any time. Like I said, anything small, big, be sure you can reach out to us along with anyone else you may have established relationship with. So we will open it up for questions. Let's get it rolling. All right, question for Stephen here. Can you describe a need versus a want when it comes to academic advising for a student athlete? You mentioned prioritizing needs to prevent burnout, and this is from Oliver.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's really going to be dependent, on your student athlete. But, I'll take it back to an example, kind of the way that we structure some things here of, back when I had these guys on my team here. And so, really with JB and Michael being our assistant academic coordinators, they took the bulk of the freshmen, and then kind of that next step of needs, sophomores, and then, Keenan and I would kind of handle some of most of the juniors and seniors. But, and so we structured it that way because we knew that there might be some juniors and seniors that needed some support. So I wanted to be there to be able to provide that. And that might not be an everyday thing, but to have that ability there. Whereas if we took everybody that needed support to begin with and had something scheduled every single day or every single week, then none of us would have the time to pick up when somebody else needed something. And so there's going to be those folks that, in all honesty, you're going to come across them that, they might only need to meet with you really one time a week, but they want to meet with you 3 times a week because they like the interaction. They like being able to do that. They like being able honestly, they might be a little lazy and they like you telling them what they need to do instead of them going to do it themselves. And so if you allow everybody on your caseload to be able to kind of dictate what they want, you're going to overload yourself. And so sometimes, unfortunately, we might have to, hey, yeah, you've got a B- in the class and you want a tutor for it. But we don't have any like our tutors are already maxed out with all the guys that have D+ in the class. So sorry, hey, you got to go on campus for the campus resources or things like that. And so that would kind of be the need or want, if that answers your question.
Don't be shy. Don't be bashful. You can use the raise your hand feature if that also helps you. You're more than welcome, Oliver. There we go. How often do you travel with your teams? Well, let's start with Mr. Lozano and then Mr. Burgess. Let's see what we got over there. Power 5 and FCS, what we got?
Yeah, so unfortunately this past fall, we were not able to travel with the team, but in a normal non-COVID world, we travel for all away games throughout the season. In addition to that, we also take our learning specialists as well. And we hold study hall. We leave on Thursday evenings and we hold study hall on Friday mornings. So when the team gets up, gets breakfast, has treatment from like say 8 a.m. to about 1 p.m. We have that time frame to work on academics. We bring our laptops, we bring our support staff, and we have study hall, right? And I think it's really important not only to get stuff done that's due that week, but always to be looking ahead, right? And while it's a business trip, it's also a chance to understand that academics is still a priority and that it still needs to be taken care of because we don't want to get behind, right? When you're gone from Thursday through Saturday evening, guys get back home late Sunday. So we want to make sure we're always staying one step ahead, and it's very, very beneficial for our staff here at A&M.
And then I do not travel with my teams. My supervisor, who's the primary coordinator for football, she at times will travel with football to away days. And then men's basketball, if they go into like a postseason tournament or something with an extended stay, we'll have a coordinator travel then. But for the most part, we do not travel with teams here at Idaho.
Awesome. And then we got 1 minute. So this is I'll leave this to Jonathan as it's directed to him. That was a question from Stephanie. Then I'll let Jerica share the QR code so you all can evaluate us. Actually, if you want to put that up now, Jerica, that would work. The question for JB, and then they said if others would like to chime in. You mentioned advising student athletes about class schedules, majors, classes they should take, etc. Is that more of a hard technical skill that just comes with experience, or is it something that's more intuitive?
I guess in some ways both. I think, when you get to a university, it's going to take you a while to become familiar with the different majors and the different programs, what that looks like. And that's where we can lean heavily on either other people in the academic department or the advisors on campus to get an idea of it. And then, there are some other things you may see where student athletes who, have come in, academically underprepared, they're going to need to take some classes to kind of adjust to college, and they want to go into something like engineering or, medical science. And, there may be, it's just explaining the way that this is going to look. But those may be some conversations where it's like, hey, if you want to do this, this is how much work truly has to go into it. And that's something you can kind of get a feel of. And if they're willing to put in the work, it's like we're willing to provide the support, but sometimes they'll kind of see what it truly looks like, and they may decide they want to go kind of a different route. So I think it's definitely, it can be a little bit of both, I would say.
I could jump in real quick.
Fast, JB, just want to kind of throw something else out there. Currently at A&M, we're in the process of creating like a database with classes that our students have taken, with any information we may have about professors, grades that they got, the overall GPA. So just having that information readily available, especially for freshmen, as a lot of freshmen are maybe taking similar courses, just kind of understanding that background so we can build on that and then use that as our experience as something tangible that we can refer to when putting our class schedules together for our students. Then obviously, as they mature and go through and become upperclassmen, relying heavily on campus is very important.
Thing I'd add real quick is I think developing your advising philosophy will go a long way. Your advising philosophy overall is not really going to change, but then you can adjust it as you learn the new institution. So I think that's really important. And then right before we go, I got a shameless plug real quick, but JB and Michael both came through our intern program. Keenan used to oversee our intern program before he left and did a phenomenal job setting that up. And so we actually have a posting up right now. You can find it on the NCAA job market. Also, it was sent out through the N4A listserv. But if you're young in this industry and you're willing to look at maybe another internship, or you're coming off of a GA ship, it's a 32-hour-a-week internship, and I can say we've had extremely high placement. Obviously, JB and Michael here, and then last year we've got some folks up at a multitude of different institutions going back multiple years. And so If it's something you might be interested in to learn more about, please reach out to me and I'd love to talk to you about it.
And I'm sorry, I'll probably take one more minute for Madison Whitehead. Last question. At the D2 level, we don't have a student athlete academic support department. How can we make sure we are still doing right by the student athletes we work with and get coaches to buy in and providing assistance if needed? I'll honestly give you a quick advice that I would say with this is that go ahead and kind of put your vision of what academic support for student athletes would look like. So provide a plan, put together, how you want to advise them. Maybe with you, it more so would be a time-based study hall where you have them check in somewhere within maybe an academic center you have on campus or maybe where you're housed. And then just kind of, as you're doing, just continue to ask questions. Reach out to the professionals that have been in this industry for a long time who have maybe started where you're at and things have just kind of built up. But that would be my biggest thing is put a plan in place with some research that you do and kind of bounce that off of different people. And then also bring it to your supervisor or whoever kind of could kind of chime in and maybe make your programming or different things that you put in writing come to fruition for you. So I hope that that helps. And then I think with the coaches, with the buy-in, it's just understanding the research and maybe you name drop on some institutions that you've met with or people you've met with, just to kind of give, some validation to what you're doing, and that kind of think like a coach in a sense. Think what they would want to see if they wanted that kind of to buy into something. What do they want to see? And so that'll end it for us. As you see with the QR code, this was, I will say this is my first time actually presenting, granted not in person. So I did take an opportunity to ease myself into the presentation world, but if you could just fill that evaluation out for us, that would be great so that we can just get some feedback and, maybe we can keep presenting and we can do better in the future. But we really appreciate you all and thank you again.